This video is a quick tribute to one of my friends who I started teaching Wing Chun to back in the day. This was the school where I had learned but after the Dunedin branch disbanded and I had no one to train with. My older Kung Fu brother lived way out of town, and so I figured it is true that once you know the forms and stuff, all you need is yourself to improve. But it is really nice to be able to train with other people to get some live resistance or pressure, or basically sensitivity exercises and stuff like that, and just keep the training alive. Anyway, Aaron helped establish my original school back in the Clubs and Societies Centre. That club went for about 8 years, and we were basically just left to our own devices. So we had a lot of fun. And the second time around, Aaron actually helped support this club as well in the container. 4 years ago, he died of a heart attack. Sadly, he was misdiagnosed with a hand injury by the Dunedin hospital, or might have been the urgent doctors. And so they had said that his hand was fine, but it was still causing him pain. And then about 2 months later, they got a hold of him and said, "Hey, we've actually screwed up your hand. We didn't realise that there was something seriously wrong with it." So he was on painkillers the whole time, and sadly he overdosed and died. Anyway, 4 years ago, thinking of you. About 19 years ago, this car park used to be a house where we lived until it got condemned. We had Pizza Hut over there, we had a pub called the Bowler over there. Everything's changed. Further around was Tui's Takeaways, which we used to live on that stuff because they were open till like 4 in the morning. So over here was Aaron's place, where we used to train on the balcony up there. And I had met Aaron, I think he lived one street over at the time, I'm not too sure, or it might have been someone else's house. Anyway, so this is the Clubs and Society Centre. It's changed a little bit since 19 years ago. But one time Aaron and a guy Tony helped set up my school back then. After our original school had disbanded, I thought, well, I'm not going to put my training to waste, and decided to start teaching myself. Being a teacher, I should say. So we used to train up in that top bit there. Is quite a bit bigger than what it looks like here, called the exercise studio. And when we were starting up the school, we had all the stools set up out the front, and Aaron would say to people casually, "Hey, do you want to learn Kung Fu?" And they'd go, nah, not interested. And they'd go, "But it's free for the first time." And then they're like, yeah, sure. So about probably 50 people showed up, and it was really crammed for space. So we done a basic exercise where one person does a circular type strike and the other one blocks it with their forearm, and it's quite sore on the fleshy part of the arm if you hit too hard. So back at the old place, we were asking people, because they would walk past, "Oh, what did you think?" And they're like, "Oh, it's really good, but I've got these big bruises on my arm." So only about 8 come back, but still it was a good start. Sometimes if all the rooms in the whole building got booked up, and it was much easier to start a club back then, we would train in this very courtyard. But one time there was too many cars, so it's quite a funny story. We had a student called Kazoo, who was always saying stuff like, "When are we going to get a real school with uniforms?" and stuff like that, and always going off and doing his karate in the middle of class. And he got quite rough on some of the girl students one time, and one of the houses over there was under construction, and we couldn't train here because there were too many cars. So we went and trained in this abandoned house, which was only half been built at the time. And basically, Kazoo went to go hit one of the girls really hard. So what Aaron done is he latched onto his arm, and he just elbowed him and dropped him straight to the ground. It was quite spectacular to see. It was like the perfect technique. Anyway, one time up in there, when the club had got started a little bit, and everything was going pretty good, as it does, and but this one time this guy come, he's like, I'm like, oh, you learned here for the Wing Chun classes? And he's like, actually, I'm here to test your kung fu. And you know, he demanded that we did some sparring and stuff, and you know, I was better than him, but not as good as I thought. But Aaron's like, oh, can I have a turn? Because he didn't like the fact that some guy just showed up out of nowhere and challenged his teacher, who of Wing Chun was me at the time. I don't really consider myself that much better than Aaron overall later on in the long run when he come back the second time around. But Aaron was very humble. He wouldn't try to be egotistical and try to just use some sort of kickboxing hook or whatever. But in this case, the guy stood in his Wing Chun guard with his leg hanging out, and Aaron just goes boom on his leg with a round kick, boom on his leg again, boom on his leg again, and the guy started limping. And yeah, it was just so funny, because after class, Aaron's like, but Chris, I didn't even get to use my Wing Chun, I was just using my kickboxing. This is the neighbourhood that me and Aaron lived in the second time around. Absolute shithole. So up there is where we lived the second time around, and this place was like party central. Aaron was very poor at the time, studying to get his master's degree, and he was living off tuna and rice, essentially. He was really training hard. Anyway, the second time around he had injured his hand, and so I showed him some basic stick manoeuvres from another martial art, which is a native New Zealand martial art, but I won't go too much into that. But we slowed the moves right down, so it was almost like Tai Chi, and he was saying that the painkillers weren't really helping his hand at all, but when he was doing these stick movements, he found that he was getting better results, which was quite interesting. That something like martial arts, someone can claim that it's got better results than Western medicine. So this was the flat where I actually probably first met Aaron properly. I won't actually show you the flat because it's intrusive, but one memorable story is in Wing Chun we've got this thing called the stance, and we used to get drummed into it as beginners all the time. The stance, the stance, the stance, the stance. And Aaron was a kickboxer at the time, and he's like, well, can you take one of my kicks? And so I'm like, sure, give me a full force kick to my leg, and you know, and so he went boom, and I just stood there, and Aaron's like amazed. He's like, wow, that's amazing, wow. And so I just kept my cool, and I thought that it was pretty impressive myself. But the next day, man, I was limping, I was in so much pain, I was in agony, I couldn't hardly walk. And I told Aaron about this years and years and years later, like the second time around that he come down, and he's like, you bastard, that's the whole reason I took up Wing Chun, because I was amazed at it. And I was like, well, actually, secretly, it hurt like hell. You do not want to get kicked in the leg with one of those kickboxing round kicks at full force.